here I am as a grandparent with grandkids in scouting, still doing my best to help this great institution. It helped me wind up where I am now and not end up like my friends who wound up in jail. But today we're talking about cold weather clothing. And this is how to not just survive the cold, but how to preferably actually enjoy being out there.
So you're saying your friends are politicians?
No, they don't go to jail.
Oh, yes, they do.
So the whole idea in the cold weather, as Steve would know well, it's great because the other idiots aren't out there. It's all to yourself. You can, without the leaves on the trees, you can see farther. There's a special stillness and quietness that comes with the snow. The snow tells stories of the tracks of the critters. It's a great place to operate, but most people don't realize there's really no cold weather. There's just insufficient cold weather training and cold weather clothing. So just a little background on me. This is me rappelling through a slot canyon wearing a dry suit. I've only worn one of those once. Use that where you have to get fully immersed in water, and a wetsuit isn't good enough. On that rappel, I went right through where there's a waterfall going through. With the right gear, that was a good day, not a day I was shivering most of the time. And another 2 weeks, I expect to join my Eagle Scout older brother on the side here, maybe at the top of Mount Washington. But what we work on is not being on the list of, I think it's 237 names. It's at the top of the mountain. Some people know what that list is. It's the people that came back dead. It's so important. In scouting particularly, don't want fatalities. We don't want injuries. We want to cull off all the risk we can, and we want it to not be miserable. So this is part of that. And my brother and I, every time there's another fatality, we talk on the phone. Okay, what was it this time? Was it a skier? Someone didn't know what they were doing, got blown off the mountain. There's a bunch of ways essentially you can die. And for anything we do in scouting that's dangerous, we have to be aware of this is, in the water, in this. This is where all the risk is. And I take all that good training from scouting and use it for having fun on my own. So this is on a day where it was around like minus 30 wind chill or so. We don't go out when it's colder than minus 30. There's some people that operate down to like minus 80, but it's challenged by choice. So there's one of these many acronyms, cold, where C is clean. You want to generally keep yourself clean. There's a lot of materials like this Gore-Tex, which it's wonderful stuff. It costs a bit. It lets the sweat out, but it doesn't let the water in. This is not just a regular jacket that's kept me warm in a downpour. This has been one of my best friends when I've been immersively living outside. So I try to keep that clean so that water doesn't pass through the membrane. Here's a counterintuitive thing. Your weirdest, biggest problem with clothing is overheating. If you do trail running like I do, or if you're chunking up Mount Washington, you're putting out 3 times the caloric energy as usual. So this often produces sweat. I think you know where this is going. As soon as your clothes are sweaty, the insulation value just goes away. So when you're overheating and you're feeling nice and warm, what you have to do is think ahead. Using the layer system, you take off the outer layers. And when I'm if I'm working hard and it's like 10 to minus 10, if I'm running or something, kind of what I have on right now is okay. My lower layer is not cotton, it's nylon, it lets stuff breathe. I'll have another layer, long sleeves. Fleece things like this are good because they let the moisture out, and I don't have to take it off. I can unzip it to let more moisture. Also, to avoid overheating, on this jacket, it has a cool thing where the underarms can zip open. Where you get most of your sweat is from here, back, here, and front. So those areas you have to be aware. If they're starting to get soaked, you've messed up. You shouldn't let that happen. So one of the things my brother does when he takes people up, even me, when we're going up, is before we get above the tree line and after we get above the tree line, we find what's called a lee. That's a spot out of the wind. Then we check, do we have to adjust our clothing? Do we have to take layers off? Do we have to put it on? You as the adult in the room with younger kids, you want to make sure, particularly if you're immersively outside, where you can't afford to let your gear get wet, you want to manage overheating and manage when you're burning a bunch of calories so you don't get sweated up and lose your insulation. So L is for loose layers. Lots of individual layers like that are a good thing. Stuff like this is good because it's lightweight. If you're immersively living outside or trail running, you don't want heavy gear. An under layer that I use a lot is just this. It's only like an ounce or two. So it adds an extra barrier between my body and outside. Trapped layers of air are what give you very cheap insulation. So loose layers, they don't even have to be thick. Oh, another thing, when it's much below 20, I usually have this as a lower layer. I have nylon briefs underneath for water permeability. This is water, it can go outward, and then I'll put another layer over that. I'm not going to give details, but if you have something tight and thin like this, and you're a man, have either another layer or something down there. I'm not going to TMI on that one. D, of course, is dry. I think everyone knows different kinds of insulations do not work well wet. Cloth, people say cotton is rotten. Cloth is for that layer. What kind of insulation material does actually give you something when it's wet?
Wool.
Yes, yeah. Wool, my hands tend to perspire a lot, so my inner layer is usually synthetic, and then my outer layer for my hands is this wool. I use these all the time. I think people understand the value of this. What is the advantage of a mitten over gloves, by the way?
Your fingers keep each other warm.
Yes, right. With a mitten, they can kind of huddle together and keep each other warm. With gloves, if they're apart, that's more radiative surface that you can lose heat on. If anyone is interested in physics and knows algebra, I have the equations for heat transfer here. If anyone wants to learn a little bit about those equations, I have them here. By the way, one of the equations is there's a couple different forms of energy going away. There's insulation, which is, does anyone know what radiation is for heat? Radiant heat? Radiant heat is anything warm tends to radiate visible microwave radiation outside. That's one form. There's also convection. Can someone tell me about convection? Or air currents, air eddy currents.
Yeah.
Right. There's living here where we have an atmosphere, which is a nice thing to have on Earth. Air can circulate around, and that's why breaking up, air being able to move and set up invisible little eddy currents is a good thing. Insulation essentially does that. It also reflects heat towards you, and then there's direct insulation, like an R value in something, which when you don't have air moving out is essentially a bunch of successive little air layers that keep the heat from transferring. So better R value for a house, a better insulation for a person, keeps more heat from escaping from you at critical time. So how to keep warm, we already mentioned layers of clothing are your friend, and even if you don't have a really good parka, you can essentially make the equivalent of one with the layers. And then the tricky thing for things like Klondikes is layers you can remove. With a parka, you have three options. You have it on you, you can zip it, you can unzip it. There also is an option for the head that's in there. By the way, does anyone know any of the adages about heat and your head? We big-brained mammals, the only ones with big brains, what issue do we have with our heads, thermodynamically, with heat?
It's radiated.
Yes, the whole thing is a radiator. We have these strange projections for some reason on the sides of our head. They radiate out heat. For people like me, as you get older, you have less protection from the radiation up here. If you don't have a beard, that can make you more cold. So it's a large percentage of energy that radiates through your head. Now, you, sir, have the right idea. A hat like that, that's a good way to keep the heat closer to your head. And by the way, does anyone know what happens with your extremities if your body core is cold? What are the body reactions when you get cold? There's two or three of them. Can someone, when a body gets cold, not just our species, yes?
You shiver.
Yes, shiver, it's obvious. You're burning off more energy. You can preemptively do that. As Steve said, if you're in a bad way, a bunch of exercise will save you. By the way, just going down a digression, there's a time I went over what I thought was a foot-deep creek on the ice. It turned out to be like 3 or 4 foot deep. Not only that, I just fell fully immersively. I was in the middle of nowhere, and I panicked for a while, and I thought, okay, my car's a half mile away. I'll just go flat out. I can take about this pace. I'll have full energy. And sure enough, I was panicking, and holy crap, you get immersed. But by the time, as I was going what was my maximum sustainable rate to get to my car, I actually got there not too bad. So shivering will do that, but you can do that yourself. Can you give me another bodily reaction that helps us save heat? You get goosebumps. Goosebumps are a reaction that come from two things. If you're threatened, we have this leftover vestigial evolutionary thing that our hair pulls up to make us look bigger. That doesn't work anymore for our species, but the other reaction is when we get cold, the little muscles make your hair stand up, gives you a little bit more insulation value. But as essentially naked creatures, that only does us so much good. There's another thing in there that bodies do. Yes?
It changes the circulation pattern, reduces circulation to the extremities.
Yes, right. Yeah. If the key thing when your body is trying to survive is protect the head at all costs, protect where you have all your vital stuff, and you shut down the extremities. That'll keep you alive. But what's one of the problems you can have if your extremities get less circulation? What's one of the things we try to avoid? Fingers and toes. Frostbite. I'm not going to take my shoes off, but I got all my toes. I might have lost a few toenails here and there, but never had a toe have to come off. Some people operate. Frostbite can make you lose areas of tissue. It can damage your tissue. It comes from your skin actually being frozen. By the way, what should you do if someone has frostbite, but you think it could be a long time before you can get to help?
Leave it frozen.
Yeah, you leave it frozen. Because if you thaw it, and then if it freezes again, what really hurts is those little ice crystals. They rupture the little cells in there. It causes huge damage when a being like us has frozen. We're not like tardigrades where we can be frozen solid and have a good chance of living through it. So you don't want to get to that point, but you have to be mindful. If your body is cold, insulation is cut off there, so you want to be mindful of that, not let your core be cold. And there's a counterintuitive thing. You warm this, you warm this, and these are more likely to take care of themselves. But when you're around little kids, if they're stopped, you have to go up to these little kids and say, can you feel your toes? Can you feel your toes? In Klondike Derby, when it's getting down single digits, you want to, particularly Weeblos troops, go around to the kids, try to get them on us to do that. If they can't, we have to be the adults in the room and send them back so they don't get numb. Once you get numb, then bad things can happen. Yes,
so in the
please.
movie Batman Begins, there's that scene where Bruce Wayne falls in the water, and the guy who Qui-Gon Jinn, merging says, keep the chest warm, everything else will take care of itself, which is kind of what you just said. I remember when that movie came out, the Boy Scouts of America came out and said, no, you don't listen to what they said there. So,
but there's a triage point. Yeah, you don't want to lose fingers, toes, you don't want to get frostbite, but if you really think triage, you really have to...
Yeah, because I agree with what you said.
Right,
You gotta keep this area warm, and by keeping this area warm, by
then you can get
This
more
stuff might be okay.
there, right. But on any emergency, you wanna keep your head. If, when your kid's is arterial bleeding, you don't start screaming in panic. You just go and do what you have to do. Okay, so keeping ourselves dry is of course essential. The biggest threat to your dryness probably comes from within. We have to manage that and be mindful of that. Loose-fitting clothing, I cited an example where tight-fitting pants can be a problem. Those air gaps are your friend for extra insulation. Cotton, just by nature of the fabric, tends to be hydrophilic. It tends to absorb water. That's not a good thing. Steve might have mentioned in sleeping bags, the better ones can be a little bit damp and still work. Different insulation works better with a certain amount of moisture in it. Of the synthetic fibers, man-made fibers, most of them tend to be lighter weight and let the moisture pass out. Some are better insulation than others. You can pay a huge premium to get stuff that's lightweight, long-lasting, or things like Gore-Tex that let the moisture out, don't let the rain in. We don't necessarily need those. By the way, why does my all-weather, long-distance training daughter carry one of these in her vest thing in the cold season, or even the rainy season? What can this become? Yes, right. Poor man's ponchos. I'm not going to rip this one out to do it. You pop a hand out, become kind of born again, pop your head through there, and it can be a poncho. I actually had a time on my bike where, holy crap, miles from anywhere dry, it's starting to rain, just panhandled one of these things, and I was much warmer than my friends riding with me. Biking is tough because you can't do the trick of going flat out to get warmer, because if you go flat out, now you're going 20 miles an hour, great, you have a lot of calories out, but yeah, you have all this wind coming at you. Okay, so Gore-Tex is our friend. Obviously, as I think you mentioned, you have nice boots there. Winter constantly with the kids, no boots in the Klondike course. They're not your friend. Boots tend to have better insulation. By the way, there's all kinds of things for extra heat. I found these just not to work. You can plug a battery in. Having batteries on your person isn't all that great. Just a quick shout out for poor people making your own stuff. I do this all the time. This is just a cut-off sleeve from a hat. If I wear a hat like you have, and I'm doing running training, that's too much for me. My head gets sweaty. I just can't have that. But still, your hat is my best friend. Cut off a sleeve from a retired shirt. It goes like this. For me, at a running level of energy output, this is just right. It costs nothing. If I lose it, it's no big deal. Sure, I'm not out there in style, but it makes a handy thing. You can even use this in combination with other things. So winter boots are good. There's a change on Appalachian Trail people. They used to wear boots. They all now wear trail runners. And scouting, hiking, backpacking people, if it's not winter time, they just don't wear boots anymore. That's a whole other thing. For socks, I sometimes go 2 layers. It's socks, synthetic are good, and I think we all know a dry pair of socks is good. If your hands perspire like mine do, that means your feet also do. Your socks can get wet. I try to always have a dry pair of socks if it's going to be cold. I think did we tell kids on Klondike to just have that on their sled? That's part of what they do. Now, for snow getting in your boots, does anyone know the solution to having, I call it drop-in? It's easy with sneakers. Snow comes in here, dirt comes in here. With boots, you go in deep snow, it'll drop in. What is the thing to solve that problem? Gaiters, yes. These are they're small, short, lightweight gaiters that go over trail running shoes. And trail running shoes have a little metal loop here, there's a little clip here, and then trail runner shoes have a little Velcro thing here, and they're very lightweight. They just go to cinch in your socks, and then just clip on there and here, and they keep dropping from occurring. They're cost cheap. The best kind are these, where there's a little, this clip goes in the loop that's in cross-country ski boots and some trail runners. And right here, she has a little, can you just hold your foot up? This little loop right here from the other direction, this would clip on. That's a gator, that means it's a gator-friendly shoe. This eventually gets worn out, not as much if you're in snow. And then this cinches up, snaps here. So when I cross-country ski and sometimes go through drifts and stuff, this adds extra insulation value to my feet because it keeps me from losing calf energy, keeps my feet warmer, and then I don't have that drop in snow that melts. If you don't have that, you manually cover it. I think I mentioned that a glove like this, you can get versions that are cell phone friendly, that you can use your cell phone, and then I'll mate them up with these. I can take one pair off or the other, and that for me is good enough hand solution. If you're really into high winds, there are shelled gloves that skiers use that the wind will cut through a material like this. For skiing, where you get exposed to that extra wind and you don't have the caloric output, it's all the more important to have a harder shell so the wind doesn't cut through your material. I try to not go in open spaces when I'm out, and when my brother and I get above the tree line, we pick up our pace because that's where the wind will cut in. We try not to be up there very long. So keeping your head warm is important. Does anyone know what impairment you get as you get hypothermia? You actually become somewhat irrational. You don't always think right. One of the cases that my brother and I studied out fatalities in the White Mountains, there was an Eagle Scout who went out alone. He was found in just his shorts. He had made a mistake to go out alone. He had in testosterone that people with white chromosomes have. It sometimes makes us be too competitive, too macho, and testosterone might be your friend for having muscles, but it's not your friend when it comes to time to abort the mission and turn back. This Eagle Scout, unfortunately, did not abort. He got in over his head from hypothermia. He didn't realize he was getting irrational. We say mumbly, bumbly, stumbly. Occasionally I've seen it in scouts when they get too cold. As part of the progression of losing his mind, he actually thought he was overheated and took stuff off. So you have to, just as when you get older in danger of being senile or whatever, or impaired by drink or emotion or whatever, you also have to be aware that cold can impair how well your head functions. Got to protect it at all costs. For face being warm, there's things, what's the Norwegian term for a thing that you wear that protects your face? I think it begins with a B. Balaclava. This is one that I've just about worn out. Nice thing about this, I put it on before my final layer. If I don't have a hood, my upper coat wraps around here. I can cinch up this around my face. Why in cold weather is this sometimes part of my cold weather gear? These are contact lenses. I wear glasses. I sweat a lot. If you exhale, the thing nice about this is with a Kenny, we all know what a Kenny hat is. My dad served in the Air Force in Alaska. You had those that went forward like this, so it's a telescope in front of your face, so you have it does two things for you. It keeps the hot air there, and it keeps the moisture there. One of the problems out when it's really cold is the cold sucks all the moisture out of the air. You have zero humidity, so every time you exhale, you're losing respiration, and then conversely, every time, and you lose heat with that, every time you inhale, now there's dry air coming in that dries out your passages. When you have a Kenny hat folded like that, it keeps a warm bubble of air, and that's part of being good in temperatures, I wouldn't go out to minus 60 degrees. That's a way to do that, keep that warm bubble there around your face. Ski goggles is something, when it's like around minus 40, the limit I go, I'll have these on, and then there's also yeah, here it is, my ISIS hat. That thing there with just the eyes. But my problem with this kind of thing is my exhaling high moisture air tends to fog up my glasses. So, and then it becomes tricky when there's ice everywhere and you've got to be able to see well. So I consider this part of my cold weather gear. So, you can always have a fire, but you have to be aware of what a lee is. A lee is a place, you should always be aware which direction the wind is coming. It's a place where you're out of the wind. If the wind was coming from this way, and this is a rock, a good place to check your gear and be hunkered down here where the wind isn't blowing. You can make adjustments only when you're out of the direct wind. Fires are for camp. When you're moving, you don't have time to get wood and make a fire and muck with that. You usually want to just keep moving. And by the way, if you're moving, your toes usually don't have a problem because every time you step, it's mushy. The energy of collapsing your layers below your feet and expanding them, and in your feet, it pumps the blood through, and direct kind of friction losses actually heat up your toes. When you're stopped, and like if you're a judge in Klondikes, then your feet will get colder. By the way, one foot solution you can do is with these inserts. You pull them out of your boots. There's hand warmers that are chemical warmers. Toe warmers have sticky. You put them underneath here, slide them in. They don't always work for all forms of human locomotion because as they bunch up, depending on your toe dynamics, the top of the toes, they can get in the way. So it's something you can try ahead of time to know what works. For me, in my cross-country ski boots, these work. And sometimes when I retire one set of footwear, if it has extra good padding, I save that to swap it out during the cold season. So types of cold. There's wet cold that goes from 50 degrees up warmer, and a high percentage of the fatalities are not when it's really down real cold. Why is it more concerning if it's a little above freezing than a little below freezing? When it's above freezing, that means the rain can happen. Rain can soak you. That's where most people get in trouble. If you get soaked, you don't have the insulation. If you can't get dry, you can be in a bad way. When it's a lower, colder range of cold, it's actually safer. When if you're in that middle range, below freezing is actually better. In fact, when there's snow on your tent, that can insulate stuff more. If you have snow, you can make a windbreak, quincy shelter out of it. Once you get down 0 and below, then it starts becoming low enough that it's problematic, and you really have to be mindful of those. An Arctic cold going below minus 20, I don't think any of us would want to take scouts out at that temperature. There are troops in Minnesota and Alaska that, they'll go to around minus 20 or so, but you wouldn't want a kid first time just immersing in that. We all try to be mindful of the challenges we expose the kids to. So for loss of body heat, this becomes a thermodynamic and a biological issue. I have equations over here for anyone who likes physics and math. Does anyone know the definition of homeostasis? The body's doing a whole bunch of it right now. You autonomically regulate your salt level, your water level, your calorie level, your blood pressure, your temperature level. There's a ton of different things that are just going on in the background. So there's things that we already talked about, the tools that your body has is its discretion to respond to this stuff. There also is something known as brown fat. There's people that say if you intentionally expose yourself to cold periodically, you'll put on more brown fat. Brown fat is like always on, always generating heat. I don't know if exposing yourself to cold makes people lower their overall weight. The data's not in on that, but that's one of the kinds of things that your body can do. Bees do that. They operate in colder weather, but they need to burn fat to do it, because we have evolution of being colder weather mammals. We have the extra fat that can get burnt in us. Going to the physics of this, I mentioned this before, radiation is anything hot radiates heat. The formula for that, I think, is temperature cubed, which means there's a much higher heat radiation as you get warmer and warmer. But we're generally, there's a heat gradient. The inner part of us is what temperature Fahrenheit?
98.6?
Yeah, 98.6. I think that's around 37 C. I should know that's what the rest of the world uses. And from the very core outward, it kind of dips off, and surface temperature, my arms right here might be 75, underneath here might be 80, it kind of drops down as you go. So that's a high amount of heat loss, just gets radiated out in the icy cold of space. And that's why it can get incredibly cold in space, because there's no air insulation to hold that radiation back, and you can chill down real quick in outer space. Conduction is direct heat flow from one material to another, and just like electrical conduction, a resistor can have more or less resistance to the flow of electricity. Something with better insulation properties better resists the conduction of heat. That's kind of your first line of defense. Convection is natural air currents that go out there. By the way, another great emergency thing, my daughter and I both keep in our running vests if we go out when it's colder, is you can get them free after races, but these Mylar lightweight plastic little bag things. I've bought them, they're really cheap if you buy them 10 at a time, but during cold season I always have one of those in the bottom of when I bike, cross country, ski, run, whatever. So evaporation is a whole nother thing. It takes energy to phase change water from water wetness to particles that float out free. We all know when we sweat that actually gets rid of heat. And respiration. Every time you breathe out, you're breathing out warm air in the cold time, conversely taking in cold. And then there's also evaporation inside your lungs because you're breathing out humid air. We've talked about the different layers of clothing. That makes...
I'm sorry, you had percentages on there, but there's different, the heat loss of your body?
Oh, yes, sorry, those were heat losses of your body. I don't know why this boarded out my pictures there. I think I might have been done. I'll see if this can bring it back in. If I can't do this, I think I've got most all this. I'll see if this comes back or not. But yeah, I've heard different numbers for the percentages. Part of it depends on what kind of clothing. An awful lot goes out over your head. The rest of your torso generates most all the heat. And what Steve said was spot on. If you're able to have more food in you that's that is digesting, then that's a good thing. That's your friend to have extra heat in you. So right here is the kind of clothing that you want to select. I think we had talked about most of that. Yeah, here's a good list of stuff. I don't have a pair of long winter underwear, but I think we know what that is. It has it's usually cotton, but it has little pockets. This stuff is light, but when it touches your skin directly and doesn't stand off and is smooth, it doesn't have the insulation value of something that's thicker. A thing I don't like about a lot of these tights running is they tend to kind of crawl down. Sometimes they use safety pins on them. Sometimes bikers use, the reason, does anyone know why bike people always wear tight clothes and not loose? It's less air resistant. But they often don't operate to colder weathers. It's possible to do cold weather biking. Most bike people don't do that. There's a technique for that. So we talked about socks. Thicker boots, of course, give you more insulation value. Some people do stuff like put a plastic bag in. I don't, because that it might keep the rain out, but my feet perspire so much. It's just a formula to soak everything that's in there. It might make me warmer at the start, but by the end of a longer time, for me, that doesn't work. You can also, there's insulated boots. You can spend any amount of money and all this kind of stuff. The people that go out colder than I do have insulated boots. I, on ice, use a traction system called micro spikes. Right here, for ice, it's something that can go on boots. The people who I see on the peaks above the snow line that really have the good gear, they have the full crampons that have about 2-inch spikes, often built right in the boots. If they do ice climbing, the front two protrudes, you can kick into the ice. There's always a more crazy person for doing insane stuff outdoors. So we mentioned the lighter stuff, fleece, a windbreaker. This can pack up really tight and be in the back pouch of my running vest. It's also a windbreaker, something to break the wind is better. Some things that tend to, a thing like this tends to let the wind through a little more. This is fleece. You can have inner pants. Oh, there's also rain pants. I tend to not use them myself because my legs don't need as much insulation, and even if they're Gore-Tex, my sweat in my legs when I'm really pumping hard, you get wet no matter what. And even with Gore-Tex, if you're really exercising hard, there's a saying, you get wet no matter what. It's either your own sweat makes you wet, or the rain comes through. An answer that people who live immersively on the Appalachian Trail know, you just don't even worry about being wet. You just go at an energy level to get homeostasis, be warm enough, and no matter what, you keep an intact one of these in your backpack with your dry clothes to sleep on. Some people, I don't like to hike this way, but they'll go all day in the rain, in their wet clothes, and then once they set up, and this is not fun, once they set up their tent, then they always save their dry clothes for their sleeping bag. And then the worst thing is when you wake up, before you break everything down, you take off all your dry clothes, it goes back in here, you resist the temptation to keep it on, then you put on that wet clothes and try to, as quick as you can, get up ahead of steam. So you build up the heat. Eventually, if it stops raining, the heat that you build up by going at a higher aerobic output will dry off your clothes for you. Or if your friend the sun comes out, then that'll do it. I think we went over these things. I don't like parkas because I like to be able to shed, and I like to not just walk. I inject up and like to do the full out aerobics. So for that, layers are better. I think we mentioned ski masks and ski gear can be your friend. It's the kind of thing that I don't use real often. I think we covered all this good stuff. Are there any questions I can answer or comments, things from people's experience for the good of the order?
I just had one comment about
Please.
about gear. Check what the manufacturer says on how to use it properly. I'm a safety professional, and I had one of those nice yellow jackets with all the reflective stuff on it.
Yep.
And it was meant for winter time. And I was dressed for the cold. I had sweatshirt
Yep.
on, I had multiple layers, all this stuff. And I then put the jacket on top. Well, the jacket was supposed to be rated for like 20 degrees and less. And I'm like, why am I shivering in this jacket? And I was talking with the manufacturer's rep, and they said, take off some of your layers. And the reason is the materials inside the jacket were designed to reflect the heat back into me, but they weren't getting the heat because I had so many layers on underneath that I wasn't generating the heat for it.
So reflective,
it was
the
a
reflective
reflective
heat
thing
is
inside
better
the jacket,
closer as an inner layer to do that.
Yeah.
By the way, there are clothing that works both ways on that. There's stuff that, the problem with Mylar, these kinds of things reflecting heat is they keep the moisture on you. Now what I often do when I camp out in the cold, is underneath my air mattress, I put this down so it reflects heat, but if it's close to my sleeping bag, then the moisture that comes off me condenses on that, because moisture condenses where it hits cold stuff. But there's clothing that's like regular clothing, but it reflects heat. Now, the cool thing about some of this is you operate, and we talk about this today, it's a separate subject, in hot weather, like Vilma. You can buy clothing that reflects more of that heat and allows your moisture to wick out so you feel colder. You pay a premium to get both that and have it be lightweight. But as you get older, you can pay more money for lighter weight as your legs get weaker, not have as much back, and you can essentially pay more money for comfort. Are there any, am I supposed to be done by quarter to give you time for the next class? Okay, well, yeah, thanks, go ahead and cut.